The Marriage of Stars Commander Lyra Cashin stood before the Council of Elders in the Grand Chamber of Zinther Prime. Her silver armor gleamed under the crystal lights, each plate etched with the symbols of her military achievements. She had led fleets, conquered territories, and brought glory to her people. Now the council asked her to do something far more difficult than any battle. "You want me to marry a human?" Lyra's voice carried disbelief through the vast hall. Elder Vorath, his aged face marked with ceremonial scars, nodded slowly. "The war has drained our resources, Commander. Our economy crumbles. Our children go hungry. The humans offer peace, prosperity, and protection through alliance. They ask only for a symbolic union between our peoples." Lyra clenched her fists. The Zinthari were warriors, proud and fierce. Their blue skin and towering frames had intimidated countless species across the galaxy. To accept help from humans, those small, soft creatures who had only reached the stars a few generations ago, felt like admitting defeat. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Because you are our greatest warrior," Elder Mirash spoke, her voice gentle despite her warrior's bearing. "If you can make peace with humans, all Zinthari will follow. You will show that strength lies not only in conquest but in wisdom." 3 weeks later, Lyra found herself aboard Concordia Station, a massive structure floating in neutral space between Zinthari and human territories. The station had been built specifically for diplomatic meetings, its architecture blending styles from dozens of species. Today it would host the first marriage between a Zinthari and a human. Lyra examined herself in the mirror of her preparation chamber. She wore traditional Zinthari wedding robes, deep purple fabric woven with silver threads that caught the light. Her long white hair had been braided with crystal beads, and ceremonial paint marked her face with the symbols of new beginnings. She looked every bit the warrior princess her people expected. A soft chime announced a visitor. Lyra turned to see Ambassador Then, the Zinthari diplomat who had arranged this alliance. The older woman smiled warmly. "Are you ready, Commander?" "I have fought in 100 battles," Lyra replied. "How can a wedding frighten me?" "Because battles have clear enemies and obvious goals," Then said wisely. "Marriage requires something much harder: trust." The ceremony hall took Lyra's breath away. Thousands of guests from dozens of worlds filled the seats. Holographic flowers from Earth floated alongside bioluminescent plants from Zinthar. Music played, blending human instruments with Zinthari war drums in a surprisingly harmonious combination. Lyra walked down the long aisle, her height making her tower over most of the assembled guests. At the altar waited her future husband. She had seen his picture during the negotiations but had paid little attention. Now seeing him in person, she studied him carefully. Dr. Marcus Chen looked nothing like a warrior. He stood barely up to her shoulder, his brown skin smooth and unmarked by battle scars. His black hair was neatly trimmed and he wore simple dark formal wear that humans favored for important occasions. Behind his glasses, his brown eyes watched her with an intensity that surprised her. He seemed nervous, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, but those eyes never left hers. When she reached the altar, Marcus bowed respectfully. "Commander Cashin," he said in carefully practiced Zinthari, "you honor me with your presence." Lyra found herself impressed by his effort to speak her language. "Dr. Chen," she replied in English, having studied human languages for this occasion. "Let us build peace together." The ceremony proceeded with rituals from both cultures. They exchanged crystals that represented the merging of their peoples. They shared wine from both worlds. They spoke vows written by diplomats from 20 different species, promising cooperation, understanding, and mutual protection. When the priest pronounced them married, the hall erupted in celebration. Lyra looked down at her new husband and saw him smiling genuinely. It was a kind smile, warm and open. For the first time she thought perhaps this arrangement might not be entirely terrible. The reception lasted hours. Lyra introduced Marcus to various Zinthari military leaders and politicians. She noticed how he asked questions constantly, wanting to know about Zinthari history, culture, and traditions. When they discussed military matters, he seemed particularly interested in ship designs, weapon systems, and tactical formations. "You ask many questions for a diplomat," Lyra observed during a quiet moment. Marcus adjusted his glasses. A gesture she would learn was his habit when thinking. "Understanding prevents conflict," he said simply. "The more I know about your people, the better I can help build bridges between our worlds." Over the following weeks, they began their diplomatic tour, visiting colony worlds along the Zinthari-human border. Marcus proved to be an excellent diplomat. He listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and treated everyone with respect regardless of their species or status. Lyra found herself enjoying his company more than she had expected. He told her stories about Earth, about blue oceans and green forests, about cities that reach toward the sky and cultures as diverse as the stars. He shared human music and literature, introducing her to concepts like jazz and poetry that had no direct Zinthari equivalent. In return, Lyra taught him Zinthari combat forms, not for fighting but as moving meditation. She showed him how to read the star charts her people had used for millennia. She sang him the warrior songs that Zinthari mothers taught their children. One evening, as they stood on the observation deck of their diplomatic vessel watching stars stream past, Marcus asked her a question that caught her off guard. "Do you regret this marriage, Lyra?" She considered his question carefully. "At first I felt it was a sacrifice," she admitted. "I thought I was giving up my warrior's path for politics. But now I see that making peace requires its own kind of courage." Marcus smiled. "You're wise as well as strong. Your people chose well. And you?" Lyra asked. "Do you regret accepting this assignment?" "No," Marcus said softly, "though I must confess I wasn't entirely honest in my application." Lyra's warrior instincts activated instantly. "What do you mean?" Before Marcus could answer, alarms screamed through the ship. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors. The ship's captain, a veteran Zinthari named Cross, appeared on the communication screen. "Commander Cashin, Dr. Chen, we have a situation. Long-range sensors detect a massive fleet entering Zinthari space. The Krell Empire has launched an invasion." Lyra's blood ran cold. The Krell were a reptilian species known for their brutality and expansionist ambitions. They had been quiet for years, but intelligence reports had suggested they were building their military strength. Now it seemed those reports were correct. "How many ships?" Lyra demanded. "Initial scans show at least 300 capital ships plus countless smaller vessels. They're attacking our outer colonies simultaneously. Helios 7, Dramath, and Corinth Station are all under assault." Marcus stood perfectly still, but Lyra noticed his demeanor had changed. The nervous, bookish diplomat was gone. His eyes had become sharp and calculating. His posture straightened despite his smaller frame. "Helios 7 has the largest civilian population," Marcus said, his voice suddenly cold and analytical. "If the Krell follow their standard tactics, they'll target it first to break Zinthari morale." "How many defending forces are stationed there?" Captain Cross looked surprised by the humans' tactical knowledge. "Only a small garrison, Dr. Chen. Perhaps 2,000 soldiers and a dozen ships. The colony was considered safe, far from any hostile borders." "Set course for Helios 7 immediately," Lyra commanded. "Maximum speed." "Commander, with respect, our ship has minimal weapons. We're a diplomatic vessel. We should return to Zinthar Prime and let the military handle this." "No," Marcus said quietly but with absolute authority. "By the time the main fleet mobilizes and reaches Helios 7, the colony will be destroyed and every civilian dead or enslaved. We have to buy them time." Lyra studied her husband with new eyes. This was not the voice of a diplomat. This was the voice of someone who had commanded in battle before. "Marcus," she said carefully, "what weren't you honest about?" He met her gaze, and she saw something in his eyes that made her warrior's heart recognize a kindred spirit. "I was a diplomat," he said. "But before that I was a soldier. Before that I was a special tactics commander in the human expeditionary forces. Before that I was trained at the Academy of Advanced Warfare on Mars. I've led soldiers in combat across 20 star systems." "Why hide this?" Lyra asked, though she was beginning to understand. "Because I retired from military service after my last mission," Marcus said, and for a moment pain flickered across his face. "I had seen enough death. I wanted to build peace instead of wage war. The diplomatic corps offered me a chance to do that. When they proposed this marriage alliance, I volunteered because I genuinely believe in creating unity between our peoples." "But you're still a soldier," Lyra said softly. "Always," Marcus admitted. "You can take the soldier out of the war, but you can't take the war out of the soldier. I hoped I'd never need those skills again." The ship shuddered as it entered hyperspace, racing toward Helios 7 at speeds that strained the engines. Lyra made her decision in that moment. She had married this human to bring peace. Now she would stand beside him to defend it. "Captain Cross," she commanded. "Dr. Chen will serve as tactical advisor. Grant him access to all military systems and intelligence data. Commander? Cross looked uncertain. Do it, Lyra said firmly, and send a message to Helios 7. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to hold on just a little longer. As Marcus began studying tactical displays and defense reports, Lyra watched him work. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease, his mind already analyzing countless variables and planning strategies. This gentle man who had asked so many questions about Zinthari culture had been evaluating their military capabilities all along, not for conquest but for understanding. She had married a human for peace. Now she would discover what happened when that human chose war, when diplomacy dies. The diplomatic vessel Horizon's Promise dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Helios 7 system. What they saw made even veteran warriors like Lyra feel cold dread. 30 Krell warships surrounded the colony world, their hulls dark green and covered with weapon ports that glowed like hungry eyes. Smaller attack craft swarmed around them like insects. On the planet's surface, fires burned in multiple cities. The small Zinthari defense fleet fought desperately, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Status report, Marcus said calmly, standing at the tactical station like he had been born there. Captain Cross pulled up the data. Helios 7 garrison has lost 6 ships out of 12. Ground forces are retreating to fortified positions in the capital city. Civilian evacuation is underway but moving slowly. Current estimates suggest we have maybe 6 hours before the Krell overwhelm the defenses completely. 6 hours, Marcus repeated, studying the tactical display. His fingers traced patterns in the air as he calculated angles and distances. Then we need to buy them 12 hours? Lyra asked. How? Marcus turned to her and she saw the transformation was complete. This was not Dr. Marcus Chen, the gentle diplomat. This was Commander Chen, the weapon her own intelligence service had somehow missed researching properly. Captain, scan the system for asteroid fields, debris clouds, anything we can use for cover, Marcus ordered. Communications, I need tight beam channels to the defense fleet and ground forces. And someone get me a complete tactical profile of Krell combat doctrine. The crew hesitated, looking to Lyra for confirmation. She nodded. Do as he says. All of you. For the next hour, Marcus worked with frightening efficiency. He studied Krell tactics from a dozen previous conflicts. He analyzed the positions of their ships and identified patterns in their attack formations. He calculated firing solutions and defense angles with mathematical precision. The Krell fight like they think, Marcus explained to Lyra as he worked. Linear, hierarchical, predictable. They have overwhelming force, so they've never needed to be creative. That's their weakness. How do we exploit a weakness when we have 1 diplomatic ship and a dozen damaged defenders against 30 capital ships? Lyra asked. Marcus smiled, and it was not a kind smile. We make them afraid. The Horizon's Promise descended toward Helios 7, broadcasting on all Krell frequencies. Marcus had prepared a message, delivered in perfect Krell language with all the proper formal protocols. Attention, Krell Imperial Fleet. This is Special Envoy Dr. Marcus Chen of the Human Federation, operating under authority of the Terran Security Council. You are hereby ordered to withdraw from Zinthari space immediately. This is your only warning. The Krell fleet commander responded, his scaled face filling the view screen. Commander Thraxos was massive even for a Krell, his green scales marked with battle honors. His eyes showed nothing but contempt. 1 human diplomat threatens an Imperial fleet. Thraxos laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. You amuse me, Softskin. Perhaps I will keep you alive as entertainment after I finish exterminating these blue-skinned fools. I gave you a warning, Marcus said calmly. You chose to ignore it. Remember that you made this choice. He cut the transmission and turned to Captain Cross. Take us down. I need to reach the surface command center. The ship shook as Krell fighters attacked, but Captain Cross was an excellent pilot. He wove through enemy fire using techniques usually reserved for military combat vessels. They made it to the planet's surface, landing near the capital city's main defense headquarters. Lyra and Marcus ran from the ship, surrounded by Zinthari security forces. The sounds of battle echoed through the streets. Civilians rushed past carrying whatever belongings they could, heading toward evacuation ships. Children cried. Buildings burned. The smell of smoke and death filled the air. In the command center, they found General Korath, a gray-furred veteran with cybernetic enhancements replacing limbs lost in previous wars. He looked exhausted and desperate. Commander Cashin, Korath said with relief. Thank the ancestors. But one ship will not change this battle. We need the main fleet, and they won't arrive for another 18 hours. Then we hold for 18 hours, Marcus said simply. Korath looked at the small human with confusion. And you are? I'm the reason you're going to survive, Marcus replied. He moved to the tactical display and began marking positions. General, I need you to do exactly what I say, no matter how strange it seems. Can you do that? Korath looked at Lyra. She nodded. Trust him, General. I do. What followed was like watching a master artist create a violent painting. Marcus reorganized the entire defense with brutal efficiency. He pulled back forces from positions that seemed critical and reinforced areas that appeared unimportant. He had engineers build false structures that looked like shield generators. He had communications officers broadcast fake signals that made single squads seem like battalions. The Krell are logical, Marcus explained as he worked. They calculate odds and make decisions based on maximum efficiency. So we feed them false information. We make them think we're stronger than we are. We make them waste resources attacking empty positions. We make them second-guess every decision. But Marcus's real genius showed in how he used human psychology against an alien enemy. He studied Krell culture and found their pressure points. Krell society was rigidly hierarchical. Lower ranks obeyed higher ranks without question. They feared failure and punishment more than death. Marcus had human communication specialists broadcast messages directly to Krell soldiers, bypassing their commanders. The messages were simple but devastating. Your commanders are sacrificing you for nothing. This colony has no strategic value. You're dying to satisfy their pride. Surrender now and we will treat you with honor. At first, the Krell ignored these messages. But as hours passed and the defense held against all odds, doubt began to creep into their ranks. Krell soldiers started to see their comrades die in ambushes that shouldn't have been possible. They watched as positions they had been told were weakly defended turned into death traps. They heard rumors that other Krell units were questioning their orders. On the second day of the siege, something unprecedented happened. A Krell transport ship broke formation and landed near the defense perimeter. 50 Krell soldiers emerged with their weapons lowered, requesting to surrender to human command. General Korath was stunned. In 30 years of fighting Krell, I have never seen them surrender. They fight to the death or retreat. Surrender brings dishonor. It brings dishonor in their culture when ordered by superiors, Marcus explained. But I offered them something their commanders never did. A choice. The trickle of defections became a flood. By the third day, entire Krell units were refusing orders. Commander Thraxos executed several officers for cowardice, which only increased the dissent. The Krell fleet, which should have crushed Helios 7 in hours, was tearing itself apart from within. Lyra watched her husband coordinate this psychological warfare campaign with a mixture of awe and concern. Marcus rarely slept. He ate only when reminded. His eyes carried a weight she recognized from her own mirror after hard campaigns. This was a man who knew war's true cost but would pay it anyway to protect innocents. On the fourth day, as Krell morale collapsed and their fleet began to withdraw, Lyra found Marcus alone on the command center's observation deck. He stood watching the burning city below, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. You saved them, Lyra said softly, moving to stand beside him. I killed them, Marcus replied, his voice hollow. Those Krell soldiers who defected will face execution when they return home. The ones still fighting are traumatized and broken. I turned their own culture against them, exploited their fears, and destroyed their unity. I'm not a savior, Lyra. I'm just efficient at finding new ways to hurt people. You gave them a choice, Lyra said, putting her hand on his shoulder. Those who surrendered chose life over meaningless death. That's more than their commanders ever offered them. Marcus turned to look at her and she saw tears in his eyes. This is why I left military service. This is why I wanted to be a diplomat instead. Every time I fight, I'm good at it, too good. And it tears pieces out of my soul that I can't get back. But you fought anyway, Lyra said. When innocence needed protection, you picked up that burden again. Because the alternative was watching millions die, Marcus said. What kind of peace could I build knowing I had let that happen? They stood together in silence, watching the last Krell ships retreat from orbit. Relief forces from Zinthar Prime were arriving, bringing medical supplies and support. Helios 7 was saved. The cost had been high, but far lower than it would have been without Marcus's intervention. I understand now, Lyra said quietly. Why your people chose you for this marriage. You're not just a diplomat who used to be a soldier. You're a warrior who chooses peace every day, even though war would be easier for you. Marcus looked at her with surprise. How is war easier? Because warriors like us understand war, Lyra explained. We know its rules, its logic, its patterns. Peace is complicated, messy, full of compromise and uncertainty. War is simple. There's an enemy and you defeat them. Peace requires trusting former enemies, building relationships, accepting that you won't always get your way. That's much harder than any battle. You're wiser than I gave you credit for, Marcus said, managing a small smile. And you're more dangerous than anyone realized, Lyra replied. But I think that's exactly what this galaxy needs. Someone dangerous enough to end wars quickly, but wise enough to seek peace first. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. General Korath appeared on the screen, his expression grave. Commander Kesh and Dr. Chen, we've received troubling intelligence. The attack on Helios 7 was just a probe. The main Krell invasion fleet is gathering, 500 warships, the largest force they've ever assembled. They're coming for Zinthar Prime itself, and this time they're bringing allies. Marcus straightened, the exhaustion falling away as tactical thinking took over. Who are their allies? The Vrex Dominion and the Talarian Supremacy, Korath said. Two more aggressive species that fear human expansion. Together they have enough firepower to overwhelm our defenses completely. Lyra felt her warrior's blood chill. 500 ships plus allies meant the Zinthari fleet would face at least 700 enemy vessels. Even with human support, those odds were impossible. How long until they reach Zinthar Prime? Marcus asked. 6 days, Korath replied. The Council is debating whether to surrender or fight to the last. Tell them neither, Marcus said firmly. Tell them we have a third option. But I'll need authorization to coordinate both human and Zinthari forces under unified command. You want supreme command of our entire military? Korath looked shocked. Yes, Marcus said simply. Because I know how to win this. But only if everyone follows my orders exactly, no matter how strange they seem. Korath looked at Lyra. She thought about everything she had seen over these past days. She thought about the gentle diplomat who had asked endless questions about her culture. She thought about the deadly commander who had saved millions without firing a shot. She thought about the man who cried in private over the deaths of enemies. General, Lyra said, give him what he asks. I'll stake my honor on his success. Korath nodded slowly. Very well. I'll present your request to the Council. But Dr. Chen, if you fail, our civilization ends. I know, Marcus said quietly. That's why I won't fail. The god of calculated mercy, the war room on Zinthar Prime felt heavy with tension. Holographic displays showed the approaching Krell armada, 700 ships of death moving steadily toward the Zinthari homeworld. Around the command table sat the most powerful military leaders of both species, Zinthari generals who had fought for decades, and human admirals whose decorated uniforms spoke of countless battles. Marcus stood at the head of the table, small compared to the towering Zinthari but commanding absolute attention. Lyra stood beside him, her presence adding weight to his authority. She had spent the last 2 days helping convince the Zinthari Council to give Marcus supreme command. Many had resisted, their pride wounded by the idea of a human leading their forces. But the alternative was extinction. The enemy fleet will arrive in 4 days, Marcus began, his voice calm and clear. They outnumber us nearly 5 to 1. In a conventional battle, we would lose, so we won't fight a conventional battle. He activated the display, showing the Zinthar system with its planets, moons, and asteroid belts. Tactical markers appeared as he spoke. The Krell, Vrex, and Talarians are coalition forces, Marcus explained. They don't trust each other. They're only working together because they see us as the greater threat. That's our advantage. Admiral Zhang of the human fleet, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. How do we exploit their distrust? We make them turn on each other, Marcus said simply. He pointed to the outer system. The Krell will arrive first, ahead of their allies. They want the glory of first victory. We let them enter the system unopposed. Let them in, General Korath protested. They'll reach our homeworld. No, Marcus said. They'll think they can reach it. We'll position the combined fleet here behind Zinthar's moon. The Krell will see an open path and take it, assuming their allies are behind them, but we'll have communication jamming in place. They won't be able to coordinate with the Vrex or Talarians. Understanding dawned on Admiral Zhang's face. Divide and conquer. More than that, Marcus continued. He brought up intelligence reports. The Krell despised the Vrex. They only allied because they needed extra ships. The Talarians hate both species but joined for territorial gains. None of them really want to share the spoils of victory. Over the next hours, Marcus laid out his plan in detail. It was complex, requiring precise timing and coordination. Every ship, every weapon, every communication had a specific purpose. The military leaders asked questions, proposed modifications, and gradually came to understand the brilliance of what Marcus had designed. But Lyra noticed something others missed. As Marcus explained how to break enemy formations and exploit weaknesses, his hands trembled slightly. When he detailed optimal firing solutions that would disable rather than destroy enemy ships, his voice carried a hint of sadness. This man who could orchestrate death with mathematical precision hated every moment of it. "There's one more thing," Marcus said when the briefing ended. "I need volunteers for a special operation. It will be extremely dangerous. I won't lie to you about the risks." "What kind of operation?" Admiral Jang asked. "We need to reach the Krell flagship and capture their supreme commander alive," Marcus said. "If we do that, the entire enemy fleet will collapse into chaos." The room fell silent. Capturing an enemy commander during active battle was nearly impossible. The flagship would be protected by dozens of escort vessels, surrounded by fighter screens, and defended by the most elite Krell warriors. "I'll lead the operation," Lyra said immediately. Marcus turned to her, shock on his face. "Lyra, no. This is too dangerous." "You asked for volunteers," she said firmly. "I'm the best warrior in this room. You need someone who can fight through whatever defenses that flagship has. That's me." "She's right," General Korath said reluctantly. "Commander Cashin has more combat experience than anyone here. If this mission has any chance of success, she's the one to lead it." Marcus looked at his wife, and Lyra saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of failure or death, but fear of losing her. In that moment, she understood how deeply he had come to care for her during their short marriage. "I'll come back," she promised. "You taught me that warriors who choose peace are the strongest. I'll prove you right." The next 4 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ships moved into position. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Soldiers trained for the coordinated maneuvers Marcus's plan required. Communication specialists prepared jamming equipment. Engineers built decoys and false targets. Lyra assembled her strike team, 20 of the finest Zinthari special operations soldiers and 10 human commandos. They practiced boarding actions until they could execute them in their sleep. Marcus personally briefed them on Krell ship layouts, security protocols, and the psychology of their warriors. "The Krell believe strength is everything," Marcus explained during one training session. "They won't expect you to target their commander directly because that's considered dishonorable in their culture. Use that assumption against them." On the night before the battle, Lyra found Marcus alone in their quarters staring at tactical displays. She had learned this was how he dealt with stress, constantly running simulations and refining strategies. "You should rest," she said softly. "Can't," Marcus replied. "Every time I close my eyes, I see all the ways this could go wrong. All the people who might die because I made the wrong calculation." Lyra moved behind him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "You carry too much weight alone." "It's my plan," Marcus said. "My responsibility?" "No," Lyra corrected. "We all chose this. Every soldier in this fleet knows the stakes. You gave us a chance to survive. That's more than we had before." Marcus turned to face her, taking her hands. "If something happens to you tomorrow, then you'll honor my memory by winning," Lyra interrupted. "And by building the peace we both believe in." They held each other in silence, two warriors from different worlds united by something stronger than duty or politics. They had found love in the most unlikely circumstances, and tomorrow they would fight to protect it. The enemy fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 700 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zinthar system. The Krell fleet, 300 strong, took the lead position as expected. Behind them came the Vrex Dominion's 200 ships, followed by the Talarian Supremacy's 200 vessels. The Krell commander, Supreme Marshal Krathax, broadcast his terms of surrender across all frequencies. His voice dripped with arrogance and contempt. "Zinthari scum and human parasites, your civilizations end today. Surrender now and we will grant you the mercy of slavery. Resist and we will exterminate every last one of you." Marcus's response was broadcast across both the Allied fleet and the enemy coalition. "Supreme Marshal Krathax, I am Commander Marcus Chen. We have met before, though you may not remember. 5 years ago I led the defense of the Kilos colonies when your forces attacked. You lost 80 ships that day and retreated in disgrace. Today, you will lose everything. Krathax's roar of fury was audible even over the communication static. You, the human who humiliated me. I will personally tear out your spine and wear it as a trophy. You'll have to catch me first, Marcus said calmly. Then he gave the order that started the battle. All forces engage. Operation Broken Coalition begins now. The Krell fleet charged forward just as Marcus had predicted. They saw what appeared to be a clear path to Zinthar Prime and took it eagerly, outpacing their allies in their rush for glory. The Vrex and Talarians followed but couldn't match the Krell's speed. When the Krell fleet was halfway into the system, Marcus triggered the communication jammers. Suddenly, the three enemy fleets couldn't talk to each other. They were fighting blind, unable to coordinate their movements. The combined human Zinthari fleet emerged from behind the moon, catching the Krell in a devastating crossfire. But Marcus had given strict orders. Disable, don't destroy. Target engines and weapons, leave life support intact. Every shot was calculated to cripple rather than kill. The Krell fleet, trapped and confused, tried to fight back. But they had never faced tactics like this. Human ships used hit-and-run attacks, striking from impossible angles and disappearing before the Krell could respond. Zinthari heavy cruisers provided overwhelming firepower, their plasma cannons systematically dismantling Krell formation. Behind the Krell, the Vrex and Talarians saw what was happening and hesitated. Without communication, they couldn't tell if this was an ambush meant for them too. Paranoia took hold. Some Vrex ships began maneuvering away from Talarian vessels, afraid of betrayal. Talarian commanders pulled back, suspecting the Vrex of planning treachery. This was Marcus's true genius. He wasn't just fighting a battle. He was conducting a symphony of psychology, fear, and mistrust. He was using the enemy's own paranoia as a weapon more effective than any missile or laser. In the chaos, Lyra launched her strike team. Their assault craft, painted to match space debris, slipped through the battle unnoticed. They headed straight for the Krell flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Crimson Fang. The boarding action was brutal. Krell warriors fought with desperate ferocity, but they had never faced Zinthari commandos and human special forces working in perfect coordination. Lyra's team moved through the ship like a blade, cutting through resistance with precision and speed. Lyra herself led the final assault on the bridge. She fought through the elite guard protecting Supreme Marshal Krathax, her combat skills honed by decades of warfare. When she reached the Krell commander, he was twice her size and armed with weapons designed to kill at close range. Their fight lasted less than a minute. Lyra used techniques Marcus had taught her, exploiting the Krell's rigid, predictable combat style. When Krathax lay unconscious at her feet, she activated her communicator. Marcus, package secured, heading to extraction. Copy that. Marcus's voice came back, and she could hear the relief. Well done. Get out of there. But Lyra's mission wasn't finished. She had Krathax brought to the bridge communication station and activated it on all Krell frequencies. Attention Krell Imperial Fleet, she broadcast. This is Commander Lyra Cashin. We have captured Supreme Marshal Krathax. He is alive and unharmed. We could have killed him but chose not to. This is the difference between your empire and our alliance. We value life, even the lives of our enemies. The effect on the Krell fleet was immediate and dramatic. Without their supreme commander, the rigid Krell hierarchy collapsed. Ship captains began arguing over who had authority. Some wanted to continue fighting. Others wanted to rescue Krathax, and still others saw an opportunity to advance their own position. The Krell fleet, which moments before had been a coordinated war machine, became a chaotic mob. Marcus seized the opportunity. He broadcast directly to every ship in the enemy coalition. This war is over, he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. The Krell have lost their commander. The Vrex and Talarians can continue fighting if they wish, but they'll be fighting alone, or you can all choose peace. We will treat prisoners with honor. We will tend to your wounded. We will allow you to retreat with dignity. The choice is yours. For long moments, nothing happened. The battle hung in a balance, teetering between continued bloodshed and peaceful resolution. Then, one by one, enemy ships began powering down their weapons. It started with the Krell ships closest to where their flagship had been captured. Then Vrex vessels, seeing an opportunity to avoid further losses, followed suit. Finally, even the proud Talarians lowered their arms, recognizing that continuing alone would be suicide. The Battle of Zinthar Prime ended not with the total destruction Marcus could have orchestrated, but with the mass surrender of 700 enemy ships. Not a single vessel had been completely destroyed. Casualties on both sides were measured in thousands instead of millions. In the aftermath, as prisoner exchanges began and peace negotiations started, the galaxy tried to understand what had happened. A fleet that should have been crushed had instead achieved total victory. A commander who could have slaughtered his enemies had instead offered them mercy and been strong enough to enforce it. Lyra and Marcus stood together on the balcony of the Zinthari Palace, watching human and Zinthari children play together in the gardens below. Former enemies were already beginning to talk about alliance and cooperation. The galaxy had changed in a single day. "They're calling you the god of calculated mercy," Lyra told him, referencing the title spreading across countless news networks. "They say you fight like a demon but think like an angel." Marcus shook his head. "I'm not a god. I'm just a soldier who learned that the greatest victory is the one where everyone survives." "You changed everything," Lyra said. "Before this battle, species resolved conflicts through total war. You showed there's another way." "We showed there's another way," Marcus corrected. "I planned the battle, but you captured Krathax. I offered terms, but you demonstrated we meant them. This victory belongs to both of us." Lyra leaned against her husband, this small human who contained such vast capacity for both violence and compassion. "What happens now?" "Now we build the Terran-Zinthari Alliance," Marcus said. "We invite other species to join. We create a coalition based not on fear but on mutual protection. We prove that strength and mercy can coexist. And if new enemies arise," Marcus smiled, but it was a tired smile, "then we'll do what we've always done. We'll try diplomacy first. We'll seek peaceful solutions. But if someone forces our hand—" He paused, looking out at the peaceful scene below. "We'll remind them why starting a war with us is the worst decision they could ever make." Months passed. The Terran-Zinthari Alliance grew, attracting species that wanted security without surrendering their independence. Trade flourished. Technology was shared. Cultural exchanges brought understanding between former strangers. Marcus and Lyra became symbols of this new age, proof that different species could not only coexist, but thrive together. They traveled the galaxy, spreading the message that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to protect. One day, as they prepared to visit a new member world, Lyra asked Marcus a question that had been on her mind. "Do you ever regret it? Returning to war even to prevent greater bloodshed?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. "Every day," he finally said, "I see the faces of those who died. I remember the fear in enemy soldiers' eyes. I know that my strategies, even designed to minimize casualties, still cause suffering." "But you'd do it again," Lyra said. "It wasn't a question." "In a heartbeat," Marcus confirmed. "Because the alternative was allowing innocents to be slaughtered. I can live with the guilt of necessary violence. I couldn't live with the guilt of choosing inaction." "That's what makes you different from conquerors," Lyra said softly. "They glory in victory. You mourn it even when it was necessary." "Perhaps," Marcus said. "Or perhaps I'm just a broken soldier who got lucky enough to find a warrior princess who understands." They stood together at the viewport as their ship prepared to depart. Looking out at the stars that no longer seemed quite so cold or distant, they had married for peace and fought for survival. Now they lived to prove that different species, different cultures, different worlds could build something better together than they ever could alone. The galaxy had learned a lesson from the Battle of Zinthar Prime. True power wasn't measured in how many ships you could field or how much destruction you could unleash. True power was having the strength to annihilate your enemies and choosing mercy instead. It was fighting only when necessary and stopping the moment it wasn't. Humans had shown they could be both the most terrifying warriors and the most compassionate peacemakers. Other species had learned that underestimating them was fatal, but cooperating with them was profitable. And at the center of it all was Marcus Chen, the gentle diplomat who could become a god of war when circumstances demanded it, and his wife Lyra Cashin, the proud warrior who had learned that making peace required more courage than making war. Together they had changed the galaxy. Not through conquest or intimidation, but by proving that strength and wisdom, power and mercy, could exist in perfect balance. The human who could slay armies like a god had chosen instead to save them, and in doing so, He had shown the galaxy what humanity truly meant.